Good morning, and congratulations, graduates, and congratulations, parents, and congratulations, grandparents. It's an honor for me to be here. It's also part of a sentimental journey, which, if you'll indulge me, has some relevancy, I hope, for you graduates. It was 36 years ago this August that I pulled into the Boulder bus station from the Denver airport. A wide-eyed, scared, but excited 17-year-old from a small town in Connecticut. I had 3 big suitcases in a trunk, and I didn't know a soul. An hour later, I walked into Sewell Hall over there, and my life expanded that moment, and it never stopped. In thinking about these remarks, I reflected on how I ended up coming to see you. Everyone I knew was going to the University of Connecticut or someplace really far away, like 120 miles away in Boston. Where did I get, what was for me at least, the necessary courage to go so far from home? The Cliff Notes version of my story is this. My brother-in-law had a beautiful sister who was 3 years older than me. When I was 15 and she was 18, she was dating a ski instructor from Boulder. I wanted to know what was so special about him. So one day in my high school guidance office, I pulled off the shelf a brochure for the University of Colorado. I don't think I read a page. I never got past the cover. On the cover was a picture of the Flatirons against a blue sky, a shade of blue which those of you from New England can relate, I had never seen. It was beautiful, and it called me. So I applied right away for early acceptance. I had nearly aced my math SATs, but my verbal was just so-so. So my mother suggested I apply as a math major. I did, and a month or so later I was accepted. A few weeks later, over Christmas break, my dad and I flew into Denver's old Stapleton Airport, and there was a blizzard that night, like I thought there was every night. I just read a book about Ward where they said it snowed every night, so that's what I thought. The next morning, I awoke over here on 28 in Boulder, opened the door, and above me to my left were the real snow-covered Flatirons, with a blue sky more amazing than the one I'd seen before, with a sun so bright I thought I'd go blind. So I turned around to my father, who was still in bed, and I said, "Dad, I'm going here." And that's how much academics played a role in my decision to go to the University of Colorado. I share that story because my college decision was a romantic one, not objective or practical at all, and it worked out just fine. As I reflected this week on the non-Cliff Notes version of why I came here, it wasn't from my mother or father. They gave me so much. Where that spirit of adventure came from, they didn't give me that. It came from the books I read in the loneliness of my teenage bedroom. It came from a combination of Salinger, Vonnegut, Thoreau, and others. God bless those high school teachers that turned me on to them. Back to that night that I walked into Sewell Hall in 1976. There were thunderstorms up Boulder Canyon as I got out of the cab. As I walked into the lobby, there was a guy playing piano. Beautiful, complex jazz. I'd never heard jazz, and he was cool. He was an all-state soccer player from Hinckley in Aurora, and there he was in his shorts with his Mexican mariachi sandals playing this progressive jazz. I mean, he was really cool. His name was Bill Roberts. He was a freshman from Aurora, although a year older, but he seemed so much older. I mean, he was performing in downtown Denver nightclubs when he was 17. And he was a romantic. He loved his jazz. He loved beauty in every form. He loved women, the aspen leaves in the fall, books, and especially his music. No guy I knew grew up in New England was like that. Not only could he express his emotions, he did, with no insecurity. He cried while listening to music he loved. I felt so lucky to know him, and he became my best friend. After 2 years as a math major, I wasn't sure I wanted to spend 2 more years with the math majors. No offense intended. Bill said, "Let's take a semester off and go to Europe." I said, "Sure." So that summer, I worked on a garbage truck in Connecticut, saved enough money for a Eurail pass, and he and I embarked on a series of adventures across Europe that ranged from visiting Michelangelo's David, a weekend at the Oktoberfest, a long weekend, and the inaugural Mass of a new Pope in Rome. I'm not Catholic, he was. The experiences expanded my mind, my heart, my worldviews, and gave me a huge injection of self-confidence that I'd never had. And on the plane home from London, I decided right then and there that when I came back to see you, I was going to switch to the English department. So let me fast-track the story. Becoming an English major was the best career decision I ever made, though I just didn't know it at the time. And I'm going to tell you why it can be for you too. I'll I'll shorten up what William already said. I now run Gannett Broadcasting. We're a large division of a large company, and our company is the largest employer of journalists in the United States. I run the TV division, as he said, with 23 stations in 19 cities, from as large as Washington, D.C., to as small as Bangor, Maine. I know we have some graduates here from Portland. We also own KUSA, 9 News in Denver, where I was the news director for 6 years in the early 90s. We are a public company that has to make money for shareholders, but we do so by doing good, making the communities we serve better places to live. Our stations just won 31 Edward R. Journalism Awards for serving our local communities. I couldn't be more proud. We comfort the afflicted and afflict the uncomfortable. I love what I do. How did I get here? Well, in addition to all that lonely reading in my high school bedroom, I was also a newspaper boy. Remember that phrase, parents? In those days, there were afternoon papers. Each afternoon before I delivered my 45 papers, I'd read the headlines and the top stories. It was 1972 or 73, and 2 reporters at the Washington Post were exposing that the President of the United States was committing crimes and lying to the American people. It was called Watergate, and I was enamored with how those reporters were righting a massive wrong by exposing it through hard work, investigation, and skill, and I found a passion, though I didn't recognize that at the time. Fast forward to here at CU, when I got back from that incredible Europe trip, and the time I decided to be an English major. I also decided to get involved in CoPERG. Although my parents didn't give me a romantic or adventurous spirit, they did give me a great, great gift. They were part of that World War II greatest generation who, after the war, felt it was everybody's responsibility to make their community a better place and to have a purpose in life greater than themselves. So I got involved with CoPERG, the Colorado Public Interest Research Group, eventually chairing the statewide board. We had some strategic differences on the board. Some folks wanted to lower prices at King Soopers, while others wanted to close the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. But we all meant well, and we were all happier because we weren't just focused on ourselves. So as graduation began to close in, I did not want to leave Boulder ever. I started to think about what I wanted to do. A friend of mine was interning at the CBS TV station in Denver. I used the CoPERG credential and knocked on the door of the Consumer Reporter to get an unpaid internship. I did, and from there my career took off. Now I promise I'll hit the accelerator in this cold weather. Simply put, my career took off for 2 reasons. I had found something I was passionate about. And 2, I had learned to write, and more importantly, I had learned to think. Trust me, if you can write, by the way, you've got a skill in short supply these days. Thank you. Thank you, Marty Bickman. Thank you, Jeffrey Robinson. And thank you to so many others who helped me to learn about the world in nuanced and humanistic terms. Thank you for teaching me the world is not about black and white, red or blue, Republican or Democrat. Thank you for helping me to learn about shades of gray, about context, and about how to think about ethics, which are rarely black or white, and about challenging my own narrow New England point of view. As an example, in the early 60s and 70s, it was fashionable to think that science and technology were evil. Hard to believe that today, but that's the way it was back then. I got turned onto a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The book was about a professor from Montana who shared that narrow view. Then he took what he called, ironically, a Chautauqua, a long solo trip on his BMW motorcycle. Alone with that motorcycle, he started to appreciate the precision and imagination of those German engineers who had built such a perfect machine. And he began to see that perfection in romantic, artistic terms, just like my friend Bill would have. And the lines between beauty and technology blurred for him. If you read Steve Jobs' autobiography, that's exactly what happened to him. Today, as managers in our company think about how to create iPad applications and the like, blending content and design, that book is serving me well. And so have so many others. Look, I know today everybody thinks that if you're going to be a really successful, you need a computer degree. When I was in college, you had to have an MCDB degree to be a doctor or an engineering degree. But let me tell you a telling story from my industry. When television began, the stars were all engineers. They had created the miracle of television, and they got us on the air, which was a miracle every day. But as that miracle became more routine, and as the business evolved, the magic makers and the leaders became the people with ideas who could write, think, and create, and paint the world in words and pictures. I suggest the same will happen now with the current technology revolution. In the early stage, the program developers will continue to rule on these as they create new technology platforms. But eventually, the natural order will need people to run them who can think, write, communicate with an educated heart and soul. And that's what I think you have, an educated heart and soul. 7 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be sent by my employer to the Stanford Business School for a full summer. One of the fascinating things I learned there was an interesting trend. In the 80s and 90s, a very high percentage of chief executive officers of companies had engineering backgrounds. And it made sense. Engineers are second to none in charting a linear course from A to Z and getting projects done really, really well. But today, we don't live in a linear world. In a digital revolution where the world moves so fast, with so many variables and so much ambiguity, it's frankly hard for some engineers to cope. Conversely, business, government, families, all of us need people who can deal with nuance, who can think in shades of gray, who can think analytically while being comfortable with ambiguity, and who can communicate with their employees, friends, and coworkers from the foundation of an educated heart. Do you know any of those people? Look, many of you probably don't know yet I have any idea what you want to do. Don't worry about it. I know your parents might. That's your job. That's their job. And by the way, that's also called love, not just wanting to get you out of the house. Maybe first you take a backpacking trip on your own. But when you get back, look for what you're passionate about, what you care about, and try to get a foot in the door somewhere that remotely looks like that and start your journey. You won't end up where you start, but you need to start. I'd be glad to take a phone call from any one of you someday just to brainstorm about that journey, because sometimes that's all it takes. And don't worry about rejection. We English majors can be very sensitive. For the same reasons we have so much empathy. This week, I interviewed 5 awesome candidates for a single job. 4 of them are going to call me and ask what's wrong with them. Nothing is the answer. It's a math problem. 1 job, 5 awesome candidates. Get over it. Now, when I talk about worrying, I don't mean laid back. Don't be laid back. Those 36 years I talked about earlier since I arrived at Sewell, they probably look like an eternity to you. Well, let me tell you, and as your parents and grandparents will, I'm surely testify, those 36 years will go by faster than you can ever imagine. Nobody ever told me to live each day like it was my last, but I wish they had. My best friend Bill, he died 14 years ago at the age of 40. Life is going to end up the same way for all of us, naked, as Steve Jobs said in his Stanford commencement speech. It won't be about how many millions you've earned, how many times your name is in lights, or how important your friends are. It's about how you're going to feel in here when you look in the mirror and how well you've loved. So in summary, as any good writer should, number 1, don't stop learning. It just begins today. Hopefully you've gotten a love of learning. 2, find a purpose in life greater than yourself. 3, life is shorter than you think. Don't waste a day checked out on lightweight magazines or video games or surfing YouTube all day. The greater community needs the benefit of your educated heart. Get off your you-know-what and do something, anything. Find your passion, not others, yours, and follow it. If you follow it hard and work hard, you'll be amazed where you can lead. And finally, an education in English isn't worthless. Far from it. It's priceless. Thank you. It's been an honor to be here.
Great.
Thank you.